After working nights to fund my son's college, I overheard him tell his girlfriend his mom is just a walking wallet. If you're just tuning in, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. And please show us some love with a like. And comment below to let us know where you're tuning in from. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as another double shift began at the packaging plant. Her hands, cracked and calloused from years of manual labor, moved mechanically along the conveyor belt. The clock read 11:47 p.m. Just another night in what felt like an endless cycle of exhaustion and determination. Elizabeth Morrison had been working 3 jobs for the past 4 years, ever since her husband Rufus had destroyed their credit with his gambling addiction. The casino debts, the loan sharks, the sleepless nights wondering if they'd lose their house. It all came crashing down when Rufus disappeared one Tuesday morning, leaving behind nothing but a note and $127,000 in debt. Now, at 42, she was a single mother juggling a day job at the hospital cafeteria, evening shifts cleaning office buildings, and overnight work at the factory. Her body screamed for rest, but her mind stayed focused on one goal: getting her 18-year-old son Damon through college. The other workers whispered about her dedication, how she never missed a day, never complained about the overtime. They didn't know about the ramen noodles she ate for dinner so Damon could have real meals, or how she'd been wearing the same pair of work boots for 3 years because every penny went toward his tuition. Her phone buzzed, a text from Damon asking for money for textbooks. She smiled through her exhaustion, calculating how many extra hours she'd need to cover the $400. Love made every sacrifice worthwhile, or so she believed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she worked for his future, unaware that her world was about to shatter completely. Damon Morrison strolled across campus with the confidence of someone who'd never worried about money. His designer sneakers, a necessity for college life, he'd convinced his mother, gleamed in the afternoon sun. Students waved as he passed, drawn to his charismatic smile and easy charm. "Yo, D-Money," called out his roommate Trevor from across the quad. The nickname had stuck since freshman year, a joke about how Damon always seemed to have cash when others were broke. If only they knew the truth, that every dollar came from his mother's bleeding hands and sleepless nights. Damon pulled out his phone, scrolling through Venmo notifications. His girlfriend Clare had sent him money for their weekend getaway to the mountains. His fraternity brothers constantly Venmo'd him for parties, dinners, and club cover charges. To everyone else, he was the guy who had it all figured out. But lately, something had been gnawing at him. The way his mother's voice sounded exhausted during their brief phone calls. How she'd started asking him to be more careful with spending, suggesting he might need a part-time job. The very idea made him uncomfortable. Work would interfere with his social life, his grades, his carefully crafted college experience. He'd overheard his Aunt Denise talking to his mother last week, something about 3 jobs and medical bills. But Damon pushed those thoughts away. His mother was an adult, she could handle her own problems. He had his own life to live, his own dreams to pursue. Tonight, Claire was coming over for dinner. He'd already ordered expensive sushi and wine, charging it all to the credit card his mother had given him for emergencies. After all, maintaining his relationship was important for his future, wasn't it? Claire Adams adjusted her silk scarf as she walked toward Damon's dorm, her heels clicking against the pavement with practiced precision. At 20, she carried herself with the poise of someone raised in boardrooms and country clubs. Her father owned 3 car dealerships, and her trust fund ensured she'd never known financial stress. She genuinely cared for Damon, but lately his lifestyle had been raising questions. While her other boyfriends had come from similar privileged backgrounds, Damon's situation seemed different. He spent freely but never talked about his family's wealth. His clothes were expensive, but his stories about home were vague and contradictory. "Baby." Damon greeted her with his signature grin, leading her into his surprisingly well-decorated dorm room. The smell of expensive sushi filled the air, and candles flickered romantically on his desk. He'd clearly spent considerable money creating the perfect evening. "This is beautiful," Claire said, though her mind wandered to their conversation last week about spring break in Dubai. When she'd suggested they split the $8,000 cost, Damon had smoothly deflected, mentioning his family's travel fund. But something in his eyes had flickered, a momentary panic that made her wonder. As they ate, Damon regaled her with stories about his upcoming internship at a prestigious law firm, carefully omitting that it was unpaid and his mother would need to support him through another summer. He painted pictures of their future together: graduate school, European honeymoons, a penthouse apartment. Claire smiled and nodded, but her business-minded father had taught her to read people. Tonight, she'd planned to ask direct questions about his family. She needed to know if Damon was the real deal or just another college boy living beyond his means. Her own future was too important to build on lies, and something told her that beneath Damon's perfect exterior, cracks were beginning to show. The call came at 2:17 a.m. during Elizabeth's factory shift. Hospital billing department. Damon had been in a minor car accident and needed stitches. Her heart stopped until they assured her he was fine, but the emergency room bill would be $3,200 and insurance wouldn't cover it all. She stood in the parking lot after her shift ended, staring at the bill on her phone screen. The math was brutal. She'd need to pick up additional weekend shifts for the next 2 months, meaning no days off for 60 straight days. Her back already ached constantly, and the doctor had warned her about the stress on her heart. But when she called Damon, his voice was cheerful and dismissive. "It's just a scratch, Mom. No big deal. Oh, and I might need money for a rental car while mine's being fixed." The casualness in his tone made her stomach twist. No apology, no concern for the financial burden, just another expectation that she'd handle everything. Meanwhile, Damon was lying to Claire about the accident, claiming it was just a minor fender bender that his family's insurance would cover completely. He'd already looked up rental car prices. $89 per day seemed reasonable for someone else to pay. That weekend, Elizabeth worked her first Saturday shift in months, her body protesting every movement. The other workers noticed her pallor, how she gripped the conveyor belt for support. During her break, she sat in her car and cried for exactly 5 minutes, all the time she could spare before getting back to work. Her phone buzzed with a photo from Damon at some college party, arm around Claire, both of them laughing and holding expensive cocktails. The caption read, "Living my best life." She stared at the image, wondering when her son had become a stranger who saw her only as a source of funds. Trevor knocked on Damon's door, finding his roommate stressed and pacing. "Dude, you good? You've been weird all week." Damon slumped onto his bed, running his hands through his hair. "It's my mom, man. She's been asking all these questions about my spending. Wants me to get a job, talking about financial responsibility and all that." "Maybe she's right," Trevor suggested carefully. "I mean, my parents make me work at the campus bookstore. It's not that bad." "Easy for you to say. Your parents aren't paying for everything." Damon's voice carried a bitter edge. "She acts like I'm supposed to feel guilty for living my life. I didn't ask to be born, you know? She made that choice." Trevor felt uncomfortable but pressed on. "What does your dad say about all this?" The question hit like a slap. Damon had crafted elaborate stories about his father being a successful businessman who traveled frequently. The truth, that Rufus had abandoned them with crushing debt, was too humiliating to admit. "He's busy with work," Damon muttered, then quickly changed the subject. "Whatever. Mom will figure it out. She always does." What Damon didn't know was that Elizabeth had been visiting food banks for the first time in her life, her pride crumbling under financial pressure. She'd started selling her few pieces of jewelry, including her wedding ring, to make ends meet. The pawn shop owner had looked at her with pity that burned worse than shame. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with bills spread before her like tarot cards predicting doom. Damon's college expenses had increased again. He needed money for a school trip, new laptop, and fraternity dues. Each request felt like another weight on her already breaking back. Her phone rang. Damon's cheerful voice filled the silence. "Hey Mom, quick question about spring break." Claire's father, Richard Adams, was a man who'd built his empire by reading people correctly. When Claire brought Damon to Sunday dinner at their estate, Richard's businessman instincts immediately activated. He watched Damon's eyes widen at the marble foyer, the way he carefully photographed his food, the nervous energy beneath his confident facade. "So Damon," Richard said over cognac, "tell me about your family's business. Claire mentioned you're from an entrepreneurial family." Damon's rehearsed answer flowed smoothly, vague references to investments and diversified portfolios. But Richard noticed the micro-expressions, the slight hesitation before certain words, the way Damon's hands trembled almost imperceptibly when pressed for specifics. After dinner, Richard pulled Clare aside. "That boy is lying about something significant. His clothes are expensive, but his shoes are worn down and resold. His watch is genuine, but I recognize desperation when I see it." Clare defended Damon, but her father's words planted seeds of doubt that grew throughout the week. She began noticing things: how Damon never invited her to his home, how he deflected questions about his parents, how he always suggested expensive activities but got nervous when she mentioned meeting his family. Meanwhile, Elizabeth had reached her breaking point. She'd worked 43 straight days without rest, and her body was betraying her. During her hospital cafeteria shift, she collapsed behind the service counter, her vision blurring from exhaustion and malnutrition. Her supervisor, Maria, found her crying in the supply closet. "Mija, you can't keep this up. When's the last time you ate a real meal?" Elizabeth couldn't remember. Every dollar went to Damon's needs, leaving her surviving on crackers and coffee. The irony wasn't lost on her. She worked in a hospital while destroying her own health, all for a son who saw her as nothing more than an ATM with unconditional love. The private investigator Richard Adams hired was thorough and discreet. Within a week, he had a complete picture of Damon's real family situation: the absent father, the crushing debt, and most importantly, Elizabeth Morrison working herself to death to fund her son's expensive lifestyle. Richard presented the findings to Clare with clinical precision. "Your boyfriend's mother works 3 jobs, lives in a 1-bedroom apartment, and hasn't bought herself new clothes in 2 years. Meanwhile, he's spending thousands on parties and trips, telling everyone his family is wealthy." Clare stared at the photographs of Elizabeth leaving the packaging plant at dawn, her exhausted face illuminated by streetlights. The woman looked 20 years older than she probably was, her body bent under the weight of sacrifice her son couldn't even acknowledge. "I need to see this for myself," Clare said quietly. That night, she followed Damon to his dorm, listening outside his door as he video-called his mother. His tone was cold, impatient, demanding money for yet another emergency. She heard a woman's tired voice agreeing to work extra shifts, promising to send money she clearly didn't have. The conversation that followed with Trevor was even worse. Damon complained about his mother's guilt trips and emotional manipulation, calling her basically just a walking wallet at this point. He laughed about how easy it was to get money from her. Just mention grades or his future and she'd sacrifice anything. Claire's blood turned to ice. This wasn't the man she'd fallen in love with. This was a predator feeding off his mother's unconditional love, a parasite disguised as a devoted son. Her wealthy upbringing had taught her many things, but never to treat family as disposable resources. She waited until Damon finished his call, then knocked on his door with a smile that concealed her disgust. Tomorrow everything would change. Clare spent the next day carefully planning her approach. She invited Damon to dinner at an upscale restaurant, suggesting they talk about their future together. Her performance was flawless, the loving girlfriend excited about their relationship's next phase. "I've been thinking about meeting your parents," she said over appetizers, watching his face carefully. "My father wants to discuss some business opportunities with your family. You know how he is about mixing business and personal relationships." Damon's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Oh, well, they're really busy right now. Maybe in a few months. Actually, I was thinking this weekend. I could drive down with you, make it a surprise visit. Your mom would love that, right?" Claire's voice dripped with false enthusiasm. The color drained from Damon's face. He fumbled for excuses. His mother was traveling, his father was overseas, the house was being renovated. Each lie came easier than the last, but Clare could see the panic building behind his eyes. "You seem nervous about me meeting them," she observed innocently. "Is there something wrong?" Meanwhile, Elizabeth was beginning her 5th straight week without a day off. The exhaustion had become a constant companion, along with chest pains she couldn't afford to have checked. Her supervisor had begged her to take time off, but Damon needed money for textbooks and the spring semester bills were due. She sat in her car after the night shift, too tired to drive home immediately. Her phone buzzed. Another Venmo request from Damon for $200, labeled emergency food money. She knew he was probably buying alcohol for some party, but she couldn't risk him going hungry if she was wrong. As she transferred the money, she wondered if her son ever thought about where it came from, If he ever pictured her standing on a factory floor for 12 hours straight just so he could live comfortably. The answer terrified her more than the debt ever had. The restaurant was packed when Clare arrived early, positioning herself at a table where she could record everything clearly. She'd invited 3 of Damon's closest friends, Trevor, Jason, and Kevin, under the pretense of planning a surprise party. But tonight was about truth, not celebration. Damon arrived in a good mood, fresh from receiving another $300 from his mother for textbook emergencies. He kissed Clare and settled into his chair, oblivious to the trap being set around him. "So," Clare began casually, "I've been curious about something. You never really talk about your family. Are you embarrassed by them or something?" The question was designed to provoke, and it worked. Damon's defensive response came quickly. "Embarrassed? No, it's just, they're boring. My dad's always working and my mom is." He paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound too harsh. "Your mom is what?" Kevin pressed, genuinely curious. Damon glanced around the table, then leaned forward conspiratorially. "Look, I love her, but she's basically just a walking wallet at this point. She works all these jobs, sends me money whenever I ask, and acts like that's her whole purpose in life." Trevor shifted uncomfortably. "Dude, maybe she's just trying to help you succeed." "Please," Damon scoffed, warming to his theme now. "She chose to have me, right? So providing for me is her responsibility. I didn't ask to be born broke." Claire's hand trembled slightly as she held her phone, recording every cruel word. Around the table, his friends exchanged uncomfortable glances, but Damon continued, oblivious to their growing discomfort. "The funny thing is, she acts like I should be grateful. Like working 3 jobs makes her some kind of hero. But that's what parents are supposed to do, sacrifice for their kids. I'm just letting her fulfill her purpose." The words hung in the air like poison. Clare couldn't sleep that night. She kept replaying Damon's words, the casual cruelty with which he'd dismissed his mother's sacrifices. By morning, she'd made her decision. She was going to find Elizabeth Morrison and show her exactly who her son really was. The address from the private investigator led her to a rundown apartment complex across town. She climbed 3 flights of stairs, noting the peeling paint and broken elevator, before knocking on a door marked Morrison. Elizabeth answered wearing a faded uniform, clearly preparing for another shift. Up close, she looked even more exhausted than in the photographs. Dark circles under her eyes, hands cracked from industrial chemicals, shoulders permanently curved from years of manual labor. "Mrs. Morrison? I'm Clare, Damon's girlfriend. Could we talk?" The transformation was instant. Despite her exhaustion, Elizabeth's face lit up with genuine joy. "Oh my goodness. Damon's told me so much about you. Come in, please, though I apologize for the mess. I've been working so much lately." The apartment was tiny but immaculately clean. Every surface showed signs of loving care despite obvious poverty. A small table held dozens of photos of Damon, graduations, birthdays, achievements, like a shrine to maternal pride. "He's so lucky to have you," Elizabeth continued, bustling around to make coffee with obvious embarrassment about her modest surroundings. "I work extra shifts so he can focus on his studies. Education is everything, you know? I never got to go to college, but Damon's going to be something special." Claire's heart broke watching this woman apologize for the poverty she'd embraced to fund her son's lies. But Elizabeth deserved to know the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. "Mrs. Morrison," Clare said gently, pulling out her phone, "there's something you need to hear." The audio played in the small kitchen like a death sentence. Elizabeth's face went through a series of transformations: confusion, disbelief, pain, and finally, a terrible understanding. Her coffee cup slipped from her hands, shattering on the linoleum floor she'd scrubbed on her hands and knees countless times. "Walking wallet," she whispered, the words barely audible. "He called me a walking wallet." Clare reached for her hand, but Elizabeth pulled away, standing and walking to the window. For several minutes she stared out at the parking lot where her 15-year-old car sat, held together with prayer and determination. "I knew something was wrong," Elizabeth said finally. "But I hoped it was just college, you know? That he was just growing up, becoming independent. I never imagined he saw me as..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Mrs. Morrison, I'm so sorry. I thought you should know who he really is." Elizabeth turned back and Claire was shocked by the change in her face. The exhaustion was still there, but underneath it was something harder, sharper. A lifetime of sacrifice had been revealed as meaningless, and that revelation was transforming her. "He doesn't know you're here, does he?" Elizabeth asked. "No, ma'am." "Good." Elizabeth picked up her purse, then paused at a small desk in the corner. She pulled out a stack of bills, credit card statements, loan documents, payment plans for Damon's expenses. The numbers were staggering. $127,000, she said quietly. "That's what his father left us with. I've been paying it down slowly, working myself sick to keep Damon from knowing. I thought if I could just get him through college, it would all be worth it." She looked at Claire with eyes that had suddenly aged a decade. "I need to make a phone call." Damon was in his dorm room, counting the money his mother had sent for emergency expenses, when his phone rang. Her voice sounded different, strained, almost panicked. "Damon, baby, I need you to come home immediately. There's been an accident." His blood ran cold. "What kind of accident? Are you okay?" "I can't talk about it over the phone. Just come home as soon as you can. And Damon." Her voice cracked convincingly. "Bring Claire if you can. I might need help with some decisions, and I know she comes from a good family." The request surprised him, but his mother's obvious distress overrode his usual reluctance to let anyone see their modest circumstances. He called Claire immediately, explaining the emergency and asking her to come with him. "Of course," Claire said, her voice perfectly concerned. "I'll pick you up in an hour." During the drive, Damon was uncharacteristically quiet, his phone buzzing with unanswered calls and texts. He'd never heard his mother sound so scared, so broken. Despite everything, she was still his mother, and the thought of losing her created an unexpected panic in his chest. "She'll be okay," Claire assured him, her hand squeezing his knee. "Your mother seems like a strong woman." "You don't know her," Damon said, staring out the window. She's tougher than she looks. Works too hard, but she's always been there for me." The irony of his words wasn't lost on Claire, but she kept her expression neutral. Soon, Damon would discover exactly how there his mother had been, and how little he'd appreciated the gift of her unconditional love. As they pulled into the apartment complex, Claire noticed Damon's embarrassment returning. He'd clearly hoped this day would never come. The apartment was fuller than usual when they arrived. Elizabeth sat at her small table, surrounded by every bill, every credit card statement, every piece of documentation showing her financial destruction. Her sister Denise sat beside her, along with Trevor, who had driven down separately after receiving a mysterious call. "Mom." Damon's voice was uncertain, his eyes taking in the scene. "What's going on? What accident?" Elizabeth looked up at her son, this young man she'd sacrificed everything for, who stood in designer clothes she'd paid for while she wore the same uniform for the third year running. Her face was calm now, resolved. "The accident," she said quietly, "was believing that my love meant more to you than my money." She gestured to the papers before her. "Sit down, Damon. All of you." For the next hour, she laid out the truth with surgical precision. Every sacrifice, every extra shift, every meal she'd skipped so he could eat well. The medical bills she'd ignored to pay his tuition. The debt she'd inherited from his father that she'd been slowly paying down while funding his lifestyle. $89,000, she said, sliding a calculator across the table. "That's what I've spent on your college expenses in 4 years. Money I borrowed, worked for, bled for." Damon's face had gone white, but she wasn't finished. "And this," she said, playing the recording from the restaurant, "is how you describe your walking wallet." The words filled the small apartment like smoke, choking everyone present. Trevor looked away in shame, remembering how he'd laughed along. Claire watched Damon's face crumble as he realized his carefully constructed world was collapsing. "Mom, I'm done." Elizabeth stood up, her voice steady and final. "The credit cards are canceled. The tuition payments stopped today. You want to be independent? You want to see me as just a wallet? Then you can learn what it's like when the wallet closes forever." She looked at him one last time, this son she'd loved beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond her own well-being. "You have 2 weeks to move out of the dorm and find your own way." The walking wallet just quit. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of Damon's world finally, irreversibly falling apart. Thanks for watching. Give us a like if you like the video and share with us in the comments what you think about this lovely tale. We always enjoy reading your comments.